Welcome to the Leadership by Design podcast, where thoughtful leaders share lessons from their journey. I'm Dave Adams, founder of the Business Freedom Group, and today we have Maxwell Ohnezeit of Arnold Machine. So welcome, Maxwell. I'd love to start off with you telling our audience a little bit about yourself, your company, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
My name is Maxwell Ohnezeit. I'm president of Arnold Machine. We're located in Tiffin, Ohio. We concept, design, engineer, manufacture, and build custom machinery, typically in the machining space. So typically for manufacturers. I've been at Arnold since August 7th of 2023, onboarded as the director of sales. I had a professional introduction with the owner and then became president of the company about a year later, so August 1st, 2024.
Great. Well, thanks. That sounds like an interesting journey. I'm sure there's been lots of hard work along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell me, from today's perspective, what trends are you seeing in your industry, and how do you see those impacting both the people and the processes at your company?
I mean, it's been so when I joined Arnold Machine, we've been in business for 32 years now, and the first, I don't know, 29 years were very successful. Prior to COVID, we lost our best customer. This is prior to me joining the organization. Then COVID happened. I don't think anybody predicted what would come out of that. And coming out of COVID, really the unprecedented demand that there was. Our company grew from about 50 employees close to 100 in probably in the span of about a year. So we had our highest revenue number, but just didn't maintain any profit. So when I entered the organization, we had suffered or had to go through a pretty drastic layoff. And so from a business climate perspective, I would say our operation was kind of on a rocky road. So I knew it was going to be a turnaround job when I entered Arnold Machine. And so I would say that today's climate has been good for us, but I think for the industry as a whole, it's been up and down. I think that there's a lot of uncertainty. The way I look at our company is we're just such a tiny speck on the map. And so even in a downturn or a bad economy or people aren't getting the capital expenditures to buy machines, I feel that we can be successful. And over the last 2 years, we've been able to really turn things around. This past February was the best month financially that we've had as a company since I've joined. And March looks like it's going to be a repeat or even better. So I would say that the total market, I just got back from a conference and some people were singing praises. A lot of people were kind of singing the blues. I think that with the uncertainty, with tariffs, constant change in the climate, people don't know where it's going to go. But my opinion is we can be extremely successful, even if the times are tough, having the right people on the bus in the right seats and really putting our efforts focused in the right places.
Great, great. And, kind of keying off the title of the podcast, Leadership by Design,
Yeah.
lessons from thoughtful leaders. How are you thoughtful about your leadership and its impact? How do you design what you want in the way of leadership, and how much of that is strategy? You said doing the right things, and
Yeah.
how much of that is culture with the right people?
I think first, so when I joined the company, first thing you do is just assess the current conditions from a culture perspective. After going through a layoff, we did not have a big backlog, so there was a lot of uncertainty. And so really the first thing I came in focused on sales really is working with a sense of urgency. So that's the big thing that I look at from a leadership perspective. So even fast forward today, I walk the shop every day and I pay attention that how people are moving, what the interactions are like. And so for me, it's people first and then focus on the strategy. And so my goal coming into the organization was to become president at the synergies between Zach, the owner, and I were there. And so, I focus on the people. So you can have the best strategy, you can have the best SVP plan, you can have, the dreams or visions of grandeur, but if you don't have the right people to help get you there, it's just never going to happen. When I look back, I just did this the other day. I look back at our org chart when I first started, we had 67 employees. 38% of them are no longer with us. And so for me, it's about right people on the bus, making sure that they're in the right seat and kind of bringing a culture that's going to work with the sense of urgency. Being curious is something that's extremely important. Being able to be vulnerable, being able to accept feedback, being able to coach individuals when times are good or if there's an opportunity for them to work on, we need to talk about it. And so I think that that's probably the biggest effect that I've been able to help produce at Arnold Machine. We have a first two calculator. So kind of Jim Collins-esque. So we just went through this in our leadership team meeting on Tuesday. We have everybody in the organization based on positions, and we go down the line. We're like, is this the right person on the bus? Are they in the right seat? And some people have jumped off the bus, and some people have changed seats on the bus, and there's other people that will want to jump on the bus. So the goal for me from a leadership perspective is trying to get decision making down closest to whoever's building the machine or whoever's working with the customer and really trying to create, they call it psychological safety, where a team member can feel comfortable voicing their opinion, expressing an idea. I don't build machines. I'm not an engineer. I'd say I'm more of a people engineer. And so I'm never going to tell someone where to put a robot or how to solve this solution. The best people to do that are the ones that are working on the machines. But with that voice comes a level of responsibility and accountability. And so trying to create that environment of extreme ownership. When I look at our organization now, from just the people, the processes that we're working compared to when I first started, we've made a lot of progress. I would say that the flywheel's spinning in the right direction. It's not freewheeling yet, it's not moving at a really fast pace, but for the last 18 months, we've been able to operate profitably and have some really, really good months in starting to really work on creating that culture where people feel comfortable that they can speak up.
I love how you talked about, as a partner to the cultural side of people speaking up, is also pushing decisions as close as possible to the point of
Yeah,
impact. When I used to work with the mining industry, they talked about doing something at the coal face, and that meant right where the tools grinding the
yeah,
rock is where the decision should be made. Now, you've gained that experience, that perspective over time.
yeah.
What are some examples of risks that you took that didn't turn out, that taught you, to do things the way that you do it, or some issues you got stuck on and you later learned about?
Yeah, I mean, my first leadership role when I was in college, I worked at a jewelry store. And when I graduated, I've always been a great salesperson, and that's where I've cut my teeth was in sales. And so when I graduated college, the owner was like, "What would you like to be manager of this store?" And I'm like, "Well, is it gonna pay me more?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do it." Well, I was the worst manager of all time. There was no training, there was no mentorship. It was like one day you're working with your peers, and the next day you're responsible for them, and as my journey moved throughout my career, at my last stop prior to Arnold Machine, they did two things for me that I'm super appreciative of. One, enrolled me in Vistage, which, if anybody's listening to this, if there's a local Vistage group, either a key group, a CE group, or emerging leaders, I highly recommend it. I mean, it has definitely helped me tremendously, both personally and professionally. And second, they hired a consultant by the name of Dave Oakley, and he came in to kind of work on the culture and help the owners achieve the goals that they wanted to achieve. So I met Dave in 2018, and the owners of the company, invested in Dave to coach me personally. And he just such a tremendous impact where, my thoughts of leadership in the past were that, you're in charge, you've got to solve the problems, you've got to formulate the strategy, you got to make sure that this is going to happen. And he really made me think otherwise. And, I knew of Jim Collins, but really never read a lot of the work. And Dave really educated me on the first two, and that's that right person on the bus in the right seat. The concept of nine boxing, so creating coaching plans using various different points of view, which we do at Arnold Machine now. And what I found was, or I guess what I learned, and what was transformational. My last role, I was corporate sales manager, so I was overseeing sales and project management for a fabricator of countertops that serviced the tri-state area. Pretty high volume. We had pretty expansive growth over a short period of time. And not one thing he taught me that I would recommend for everybody is you don't just hire somebody based on the resume. Our jobs at Arnold Machine are very skilled trades. You're not going to hire somebody off the street to be a robot engineer. They're going to have experience, but don't just look at the resume. You need to look at, do they have the aptitude to learn the role, and then do they culturally fit fundamentally with your core values and the things that you're trying to achieve. And so I would say my last role, I hired a couple people in leadership positions that I probably wouldn't have looked at otherwise because they lacked some of the experience that I may have looked for in the past. And I was able to build a team around me, and I'd call it a mini bus because it wasn't the entire organization, but it was a big piece of the business. Man, we were able to get that flywheel that I talked about earlier, just flying in the right direction. The things we were able to accomplish were pretty incredible. And so I just got the phone with Dave, talked to him 2 days ago. Still a big part of my life. He's a friend, a mentor. When I worked at the last company, he helped me. I knew I wanted to become president of an organization, and he helped me define that goal. So I'm really big on writing my goals down that I want to achieve. And if you put it on paper, it's in the universe, right, Dave? And so it's not just up here. These are wishes, your dreams. Goals are something that can materialize, and you need to put that on paper. You need to put it in your office, put it on your wall. So I defined, with the help of Dave, the type of company that I would want to be president of. And what's crazy is, if I sent you that piece of paper and you looked at the characteristics and attributes of Arnold Machine, I mean, they're like dead nuts. I mean, it's crazy. And so, he never told me what to do. And I think with anybody as a leader and you're coaching, everybody's got high performers or somebody that you look at and you're like, man, this guy could be, or this gal could be a superstar someday. You got to have the right clay in that individual. And that's kind of what Dave taught me. He's like, Maxwell, you've got the clay. I can't tell you what to do. You got to figure out a lot of this on your own, but I can help guide you based on the paths that I've been on. And I try to take that same leadership approach. I'm a coach more than anything. That's the one thing I would recommend, is that if you're a leader of an organization, whether you're a president, a manager, if you have any type of direct report, your number one job is you're a coach.
Well, that's great. Great stuff. Thanks for sharing. And
Yeah.
obviously, as a coach, I endorse the idea, and great to hear you give a testimonial for it. You mentioned people having the right aptitudes, and culture people often see as something amorphous, can't get your hands around it. But let me ask you, there's some organizations or some functions within organizations that sort of operate by tribal knowledge,
Yeah. Well,
and
dude, that's Arnold Machine. Oh my God. Yeah.
okay, but what do you document in the way of processes, and how do you balance, the benefits of both? Because if you're all tribal knowledge, it can be chaos, right? If you're all rigid process, then you're not giving people the ability to step up and be creative.
That's a great question. If I had the exact answer, we could probably write a book together. You know, I we have, I would say one of the things that I noticed about Arnold Machine, I'm surrounded by engineers. And so
Mhm.
anybody that's listening to this podcast that is an engineer, works for engineers, you know what processes are like. We are over documented on processes in my opinion. But tribal knowledge is key in our industry. So if you're in our sales and engineering office and we're working on a concept, because a lot of times we're building something that's never been built before. It's extreme. While it sounds very sexy, it's extremely risky, right, to be able to maintain margin. At the end of the day, my job is to make sure that our company is profitable and we have a great culture. And so you'll hear conversations like somebody's working on something, and an engineer will kind of say from his cube, oh, that's just like job 366. You got to take a look at that. Well, that was done 12 years ago. So how do you get that information? We're working on that, Dave. So we did have, you want to talk about failure? We had a failed attempt. So I firmly believe that AI is going to have a tremendous impact on our industry, and I am trying to be on the cusp of it. So we're not waiting to see what it can do for us. We're experimenting what it can do for us. And so we tried building an agent. We hired a firm to build an agent to search our old engineering files to be able to get this information quicker. I mean, a lot of our apps engineers graduated college a couple years ago, so they have no idea what job number 366 was 12 years ago. And it's kind of like buried treasure in somebody's yard. The way the file structure is, it's impossible to find because it's all numbers. And so we are working on it. After the first failed attempt, we're working on to be able to search those engineering files and be able to give the information quicker. I think it's got to be a balance, Dave, is you've got to be able to expose others to the tribal knowledge, but there's nothing that could replace my 25 years of
Right.
leadership, ups and downs. We spoke before. It's kind of like, hopefully this helps someone not make a mistake that I've done in the past. And so I think it's a combination of trying to get others to share the tribal knowledge, because there is a caveat to that too. I don't
Yeah,
care what field
some
it is.
people will hoard it because they're afraid of change, right?
They're not going to need me. If I teach Dave how to do everything,
Right.
You know, my goal, Dave, is not to be the smartest person in the room. If I can make that happen, then I'm putting myself in a really good position. And so,
So how
yeah,
would you characterize your goal?
what goal? I guess what
Well, yeah,
like my
you said what is not your goal, and it's not to be the smartest person in the room. So I kind of flipped that over and said,
okay,
okay,
yeah.
what's your goal?
My goal is to collaborate with others that maybe have what I would look at as potentially a higher ceiling. So like my Vistage group, when I was in the key group first, and so because I was in a director level, I wasn't a president, wasn't in a CE or CEO level. And so I felt when I was in that key group, I was like the main contributor. I had worked with a lot of people within my group outside of the meetings, which was great because I love to help people. When I joined the CE group, I kind of became the mouse at first. I'm like, this is amazing. I have all these successful people that are running or leading successful businesses. I've just become a president. Man, to be like a sponge. And so my goal for me, Dave, is continuous improvement.
There you go.
My promise to the organization is I'm going to be a better president for us tomorrow than I was today. When I look back, August 1st of 2024, the night before I was president, I was, laying in bed. Everybody has that negative self-talk. My negative self-talk persona is, marginal Maxwell. I'm laying in bed, I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I get myself into here? Am I prepared for this? But I was. But when I look back to that guy, August 1st of last year, I definitely am a better president than I was then. Now than I was then.
Great. You've talked about walking around the shop and watching how people are carrying themselves and interacting. You've talked about being in some coaching and group environments outside of work. How would you characterize in your drive for continuous improvement to be a lifelong learner? What do you think you learn inside the company and what do you learn outside the company?
I think we're so inside the company. I don't just walk the shop to to see what people are doing, right? So I walk the shop to see what we're working on, but I walk the shop because I want to know the people that work with me at Arnold Machine. And I can, we're just about 70 people now. I can say with confidence, I know every single person by name. I know something about their personal lives. They know something about my personal life. And, my goal is to walking the shop is for them to know me. I'm not the type of person that just can sit in an office. And I want them to know that I'm human and I'm vulnerable and that I do make mistakes. We had a recent vacation policy change rollout that came from up here, and man, the next day, I had three people come to me, many times removed from the chain of leadership to express displeasure with it, and they made some really good points, and we rolled it back. Outside the organization, I think a lot of us, at least for me, I'm very tough on myself, and I'm very tough on our organization internally of how I feel things are going. And so when I go to conferences or I'm in my Vistage group or in any other type of conference situation setting, I realize we're pretty damn good. And what we're working on can really work. But again, getting back to, I think, what you said, the sponge, I'm constantly trying to figure out a better way. I'm willing, and I would recommend most leaders should be willing to try 1,000 different things. And if five of them work, keep the five and keep thinking of others. We can't be the same companies we were 5 years ago. And I think that based on the climate and how business is today, I think that time frame is shortening. It's not that you want to reinvent yourself, but you need to be open and you need to be vulnerable and you need to be willing to look out the window when times are good and celebrate others. And if things aren't going great, you got to look in the mirror because at the end of the day, if you're in a leadership role, whether it's a department or organization, if things aren't going good, it's because of you.
Well, so that's, some great sharing. Thank you very much. On our way to wrapping up, I wonder if I could ask you if you could give all the business leaders out there a piece of actionable advice. What's one thing that they can do this week to become a more thoughtful leader?
I would first recommend, and maybe you couldn't do it in a week, but the first most impactful thing that you could do would be get anonymous 360 feedback. So any president or CFO, CEO of an organization of any size has to have some type of consultant or some type of tie that would be able to do a comprehensive employee survey of how their employees are feeling and then be able to get 360 feedback on them, on you. That Dave Oakley helped me do that at my last stop. And it probably had the biggest impact on me of any exercise I've done because it's 100% anonymous. One of the feedbacks I got, Dave, this may sound ridiculous, was I don't like that Maxwell sits at the head of the table in every meeting. And so I'm thinking, I'm the one facilitating the meetings. Why wouldn't I be at the head of it? So I can tell you one thing I don't do now, Dave. Since I got that feedback, I've never sat at the head of a table for work. And so,
Right.
that's one thing that, but the actionable item that you'd have to be to receive that feedback is you got to be vulnerable.
Right.
And, maybe the thing they could do in a week would be taking some mulligans, creating like a little mulligan book, which I did in the past, where any meeting I have, any meaningful conversation, when I get back to my office, I take a mulligan and I say, how could I have handled that differently? One more tip I'll give you would be, never be critical parent when you're having a difficult conversation. So that my leadership style has definitely changed there. I went from, so I coach youth football, I coach youth sports, and I need to be a better coach because I give a lot harsher criticism or feedback on the field than I do in the office. But that used to be my coaching style leading people was if I saw a mistake or I saw something happen, I would go have a conversation right there and then. I give myself the 24-hour rule now. So if something happens, I wait and I'm like, because you have thoughts. I'm a microwave when it comes to thinking, so they come quickly and it changes with what I would give that feedback the next day. But never be critical parent, right? So no one likes to be yelled at. And the example that I give is I grew up in Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania, before you're 18, you got to be in by 12 o'clock. And if I came in at 12:01, my mom was pretty strict. She was going to have my head. And I come home at 12:15, getting yelled at, I'm getting grounded, taking my keys. But mom, you're not listening to me. I don't care what you have to say, go right up to your room. But what if I was fixing an elderly woman's flat tire on the way home? So never be critical parent because no one wants to be yelled at. And so any feedback that you get has to be how it makes you feel. Nobody can discredit. Dave, you can say a point I'm making is crazy, but I can say, but that's how I feel. You can't tell me how to feel. So eliminate the critical parent if you can.
Yeah, well, you talked about engineering and you talked about working with people. As an engineer, I always say that working with people is the most complicated equipment piece of machinery we will ever
100%.
deal with.
And
And
most gratifying though too. I
yes,
mean,
absolutely. That's where
there's
you
just so
make a
many people
difference.
I've coached along the way. I've got a couple employees now that I'm working with. I just have seen such tremendous growth over the, year and a half, almost 2 years that I've been working with them. And to me, that's the best paycheck. And when you surround yourself with
Right.
great people that really want to strive and do the best and hold that level of accountability for others and utilize that autopsy without blame, where we could have rigorous debate at the table, but still leave with mutual respect, where we can talk about the opportunities that exist. That's when you as a leader can really accomplish a lot and get things done. The goal I would recommend for everybody, and some people look at me like I'm nuts. We need to work on the business, not in it. That's easy to say, right? But working on the business to me is we're all going to have meetings. If you're a president or if you're a director, you're going to have meetings on your calendar. There's going to be should be a lot of room for white space. If you can't show up to your office and sit down and turn on your computer and say, you know what? I don't have anything that I have to do right now. I'm going to think about what I should be doing, right? And that's where mentorship programs come
Yeah.
through. I mean, there's just so many great things that can be accomplished because a lot of people that have got to these positions are so intelligent, but a lot of times they've gotten to it by putting in hard work, which is respected, but then they don't know how to. I think a lot of people would be scared. Our director of ops, I'm like, Nick, I told him, Nick, my goal for you, dude, I want you to show up to your computer, get in your office, and you're like, I have nothing to do. And his first response when we first started talking about this was like, well, if I don't have anything to do, what do you need me for? I
Right.
need you to work on this business, dude. We want to grow it. We have some significant growth that we want to accomplish over the next couple of years. We can't do it the way it is now. So what are you going to propose to get that done?
I
Yeah.
love how throughout this entire chat you've been sort of contrasting control versus enablement.
You have so there's control is compliance, right? So like there's two mountains. I had this in my office a while ago. Um, the mountain of compliance is shorter than the mountain of commitment, but compliance is easy. Dave, I need this podcast to end at 1:37. If it doesn't end at 1:37, I'm going to have to write you up. Well, people are going to do whatever you tell them to do for a certain period of time. They're going to be like, this is crazy. When people are committed to the cause and they believe in it and they feel that their voice can be heard
Yeah.
and they have a stake in it, that's the type of individual that we're looking for. So not everybody wants extreme ownership. Some people want to just
Right.
come into work and leave, and that's fine. But your key players in the organization have to have extreme ownership, man. And it's like you give them an idea of what you want to accomplish, and you have them put their fingerprints on it. And maybe it's probably gonna be better than whatever it was that we thought of in our brain.
Right. Well, I think everybody wants that extreme ownership, but some people aren't quite ready. They need to be coaxed, you know.
Or they're afraid
Yeah.
that I'm oh my God, if I make a mistake, it's going to be terrible. We have a laser operator that I saw her, she's programming in the office. And so I went down to talk to her. I was sitting beside her, and the gentleman that was training her in is really experienced left. I asked her how she's feeling about it. She's like, well, I'm a little nervous. And I told her, I said, look, I just want to make sure you know one thing. It's okay to make a mistake. And we're not expecting you to be this other person. Maybe you'll be better than that someday, but we know you're not going to be perfect. And she told me, she's like, I am so glad I'm hearing that, especially from you. And that's that safety. What's the worst thing she's gonna do? Ruin a plate of steel. Yes, it's gonna cost us money, but if she can learn, and I would rather have someone try to do something and make a mistake than constantly asking how it should be done. That's how I've learned. I've made maybe I'll write a book, Dave, called 10,000 Mistakes. I don't know, but just try to get better after you make the last one.
Well, great. Thanks again for reinforcing that message. Maxwell, thanks for your time. It's been a
Yeah,
real
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
been a pleasure. To our listeners, thanks again for tuning in to Leadership by Design. To keep your leadership thinking fresh with lessons from thoughtful leaders like Maxwell. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye-bye.